2 days before Christmas I got up early and went straight to the farmer's market, filling a big woven basket with the freshest produce I could find. When I got back I started cooking Samantha's favorites. Lemon herb roasted chicken and creamy mashed potatoes. The whole house was filled with the rich warm aroma of roasting garlic and thyme. My heart swelled with anticipation. I laid out the tablecloth, fluffed the pillows and sat on the couch like a kid waiting for Santa Claus, eyes fixed on the door. Samantha had just wrapped up her first full-time job after college. She'd insisted on working through the final day, wanting to leave a good impression on her boss. I always knew she was a hard worker. It was just past 7 when the front door finally opened. I sprang to my feet, smiling, wide arms already half raised for a hug, but she didn't even glance at me. She made a beeline straight into her father Zach's arms, practically bouncing. "Dad, I got a $5,000 bonus this year." Zach lit up like a Christmas tree, his face bursting into pride. He patted her gently on the head. "That's my girl, I'm so proud of you." Then Harold and Beverly, my in-laws, came bustling over, their faces beaming. "Samantha, you are the pride of this family," Beverly said, her voice soaked in admiration. I stood off to the side watching them swarm around her. Of course I was happy for her, I mean, how could I not be? But still there was a quiet ache, like I'd been forgotten. After all, I was the one who raised her. I stepped forward, took her hand with a smile. "Long day, are you hungry? I made your favorites, I can heat them up for you." She didn't even look at me. "Mom, can you not ask all these pointless little questions?" she snapped, clearly annoyed. Then she crouched down, unzipped her suitcase, her face glowing with excitement. She pulled out a stack of neatly wrapped envelopes and arranged them proudly on the coffee table like she was about to announce the winners of a game show. Just then Zach's younger brother Jason and his wife Emily walked in. Their eyes immediately landed on the envelopes spread across the coffee table. "Wow, Samantha, looks like you're doing pretty great at your job," Jason said, genuinely impressed. "I'm guessing these are gifts for everyone. That's really thoughtful of you." The moment Samantha saw Emily, she jumped up with a squeal and hugged her tight. "Auntie, I missed you so much." I stood frozen in place. In that instant it struck me, she could treat anyone as family, anyone but me. As everyone gathered around, Samantha cleared her throat and beamed. "To thank you all for supporting me this year, I prepared a little something for each of you. This one's for Dad, $1,000 Visa gift card. Grandpa and Grandma each get a $300 spa voucher. Uncles get $200 gourmet market cards." I didn't move, I just watched as she handed out the cards one by one, smiling proudly. Emily nudged her gently and whispered, "Sweetheart, I think you missed someone." Samantha smacked her forehead playfully like she just remembered. "Oh my gosh, you're right, I think there's one more in my bag." Relief washed over me, so she had remembered me after all. Maybe she was saving mine for last, maybe it was something special. I reached out my hand just as she bent down and scooped up our little dog Coco, cradling her like a baby. She slid the last envelope into Coco's sweater and cooed, "This one's for you, Coco, for being such a good girl this year." I stood there stunned, my smile froze, my hand just hung in the air, useless. After a long pause I managed to ask quietly, "Samantha, what about mine?" She turned to me with a breezy voice that cut like glass. "Mom, you're home all day, you don't work, you don't understand how exhausting my job is. You cook and clean, sure, but that's your choice. You didn't help me with anything important, so why would I get you a gift?" Emily rushed over and pulled her gently toward the couch, whispering for her to stop, but Samantha wasn't done. She grinned and pulled out another surprise from her bag. "Oh, and guess what? I booked flights for everyone to spend New Year's in Hawaii. We leave tomorrow night." I stood quietly thinking, well fine, so there's no gift, at least we're going on a trip together. Maybe this was her way of showing she cared. He was my daughter. Who would really hold a grudge over something like this? I started sifting through the envelopes with the others, looking for my boarding pass, but I couldn't find one. I looked up at her confused. She raised her chin like she was giving orders. "Mom, you're not coming. I need you to stay and watch Coco. She'd be miserable here alone, and you're the perfect person for the job." That was it. That was the moment something in me snapped to my daughter. I was nothing, not even worth the price of a plane ticket. Rage bubbled up in my chest. I swung my arm and sent the plate of cookies I'd baked crashing to the floor. The shattering sound rang out like a fire alarm. "Amanda, what on earth is wrong with you?" Beverly shot up, her voice sharp and shrill. Harold's brow furrowed with disapproval. "You just ruined the entire night. What kind of behavior is this?" Zach, Beverly hissed, "marrying a woman like this, you've been cursed since day one." Samantha blinked, then scowled. "Oh my god, Mom, seriously, it's just a trip to Hawaii. I'll take you next year when I get another bonus." "Well, now everyone's upset." Happy Jason opened his mouth as if to say something, but Emily grabbed his hand and shook her head. I let out a cold, bitter laugh. "So this is what it takes for you all to notice me, huh? I have to throw something just to remind you I exist." Zach's face darkened, his patience snapped. He pointed at the shattered plate on the floor. "Do you have any idea how ridiculous you're being right now? This was supposed to be a joyful family gathering, but no, you had to ruin it. If you can't handle this, then go. No one's stopping you." The irony stung. I wasn't family. I was the unpaid maid, the living dog sitter, the one who cooked, cleaned, and got ignored. I yanked off my apron, tossed it aside, and stormed into the bedroom. I grabbed whatever clothes I could find, shoved them into a bag, picked up my wallet and ID. Just as I turned to leave, Emily rushed in and caught my arm. "Amanda, don't, it's late. Where will you even go?" She looked back and called out, "Samantha, talk to your mom. Don't let her walk out like this." Samantha didn't even sit up. She leaned back against the couch, eyes half-lidded, lips curled in disdain. "Let her go. What's she going to do? Run back to her mommy's house? She throws tantrums all the time. She'll be back tomorrow like she always is." I stood there stunned. 20 plus years of love and sacrifice boiled down to this. If my mother ever heard how I was spoken to tonight, it would break her heart. I shook off Emily's hand without a word and walked straight out the door. Once I got to the sidewalk, I pulled out my phone and called my mom. Mom, I said, my voice steady but hollow, I'm not coming home for the holidays. I need some time away. Maybe I'll take a little trip. She paused for a few seconds, then replied gently, that sounds like a good idea, honey. A change of scenery might do some good. Just be safe, okay? Then after a moment she added, remember I told you I was thinking of selling the old house, but it's done. The sale went through and the money's in. I'll send some your way. She could hear something was off, but she didn't ask. He never pushed. She just supported me quietly and completely. I said softly, Mom, I'm okay. I don't need anything right now, but thank you. If I ever do, I'll ask. I mean it. Thank you for always being there. She agreed with a nod. I could almost hear through the phone, but 10 minutes later I got a notification. She transferred $20,000 into my account. The note read, to my dearest daughter, go have the time of your life. That's the thing about having a mother who has your back. It gives you the courage to walk away from anything that doesn't honor you. That night I checked into a boutique hotel downtown for the first time in a long while. I lay in a bed that was truly mine and closed my eyes in peace. Early the next morning, just as I settled by the hotel window with a cup of coffee, my phone rang. It was Zach. I hesitated, then picked up. His voice was low but brimming with irritation. Amanda, how long are you planning to keep this up? Come home now. I went by your mom's place. She said you never showed up. I don't care where you are, just get back here. I didn't say a word. I simply ended the call. Who did he think I was? The housemate, some on-call servant he could summon with a snap of his fingers. The nerve of that man to bark orders like he still had any claim over me. Moments later my phone buzzed again, this time with a flood of texts from Samantha. Mom, seriously, aren't you too old to be acting like this? Going missing in action just to get attention? How immature can you be? We're flying to Hawaii tonight. If you don't come back, who's going to watch Coco? If anything happens to her, I'll never forgive you. I stared at her messages, lips curling into a bitter smile. This was my daughter, the one I raised with my own two hands, speaking to me like this. I once held her like a treasure. Now she saw me as nothing but a burden. Utility tears welled up again, but this time I let them fall, and I swore it would be the last time. I remembered when she was little, so sweet and full of love. She used to wrap her tiny arms around my neck and whisper, Mom, you're the best mommy in the whole wide world. When I grow up, I'm going to buy you the prettiest dress. I can still picture her cuddled in my lap, all softness and smiles. But after elementary school her focus slipped, her grades dropped. Zach said she needed more attention at home and pushed me to quit my job. Without a second thought I resigned. I became a full-time mom, putting everything else aside for her. But the older she got, the colder she became. I still remember the day she stormed into the house fuming, stop coming to parent-teacher conferences. Everyone knows you're a housewife. It's embarrassing. You can't help me with calculus, or else what's the point of you sitting around all day? You don't bring in money and you still argue with dad over and over. I told myself she's still young, one day she'll understand. I waited through high school, through college. I thought that once she entered the real world she'd see what it all meant, but no, this was what I got in return. 20 years of silent, invisible sacrifice. And now I stood here staring at a daughter I could barely recognize. That New Year's Eve morning she sent a final string of messages. Nice going, you've officially screwed up. Everyone's plans were flying out at noon. Don't bother coming back if you're not home by then. Don't expect to be my mom anymore. Perfect, because I was just about ready to stop being her mother too. I opened my email and sent Zach the finalized divorce papers I'd been quietly preparing. One line in the body, please sign promptly. If you refuse, I'll proceed through court. Then I powered off my phone, picked up my suitcase and walked into the airport terminal, and just like that I boarded a plane to Iceland, a land of frost and silence, for the first clear-headed holiday of my life. After Zach received the divorce papers, panic hit him like a brick. He started calling me over and over, only to be met with the same cold voicemail. The number you've dialed is currently unavailable. He paced the room, face tight with frustration. Samantha, on the other hand, remained smug and composed. She patted his shoulder like she had it all figured out. Dad, don't worry about it. This is just her way of trying to get us to cave. Classic manipulation. She's a housewife who hasn't left the house in years. You think she's really going through with a divorce? Let's not give in. Let her sit in it a while. This will teach her a lesson, show her who's really in charge around here. Zach's parents nodded in agreement from across the room. She's gotten too used to being pampered, Beverly muttered. Divorce, please? What kind of life does she think she'll have without you? Harold added with a scoff, and with that the whole family cheerfully wheeled their suitcases into the airport, ready to kick off their vacation like nothing had happened. That evening Samantha posted a photo from their hotel restaurant on social media. Glasses of champagne raised, bright smiles, all basking in the glow of what looked like a perfect family holiday. I glanced at the image, then calmly powered off my phone. Meanwhile I was sitting with a group of new friends bundled in thick coats around a crackling fire pit. Snowflakes drifted down around us, and above the northern lights danced across the Icelandic sky. We clinked Ked beer bottles and laughed. No obligations, no roles to perform, just freedom, the kind I hadn't tasted in 20 years. I let out a quiet laugh and whispered to myself, being young is nice, but being free, that's better. I snapped a few photos of the aurora and posted them on Instagram with a simple caption, Feels like a dream, you only get one life, be good to yourself. Within a minute Samantha's voice message popped up in my inbox. Her voice was high-pitched, furious. How could you? You're using dad's money to go on some wild vacation by yourself. I worked my butt off all year and barely saved anything. Do you even care about us? You're so selfish. I didn't listen to the rest, I just swiped it away. She was right about one thing though, I was being selfish, and for once in my life I was finally okay with that, to breathe, to live on my own terms. I only regretted not doing it sooner, so I posted another photo, my boarding pass for a flight to Norway. The caption was just 4 words: next stop. Even brighter. That was the moment Samantha finally broke. She started calling non-stop, leaving voicemail after voicemail, frantic texts demanding answers. Why had I run away? Why was I wasting money? Why was I acting like a child? I didn't answer not a single call. Eventually I blocked her number. Fuming, she changed her return flight. The 7-day trip was cut short to 2. She stormed into my mother's house the next evening, bursting into tears in the living room. Mom's being totally selfish. She ran off overseas while we were trying to celebrate as a family. She cut contact with all of us, and she's spending all of dad's hard-earned money now. She's even blocked me. You have to talk some sense into her. My mother sat silently for a long moment, then looked up and said calmly, "Let me ask you something. When your whole family flew off to Hawaii, did any of you ask if your mother wanted to come?" Samantha froze, her mouth opened but nothing came out. Zach jumped in quickly, trying to smooth things over. "Bess, you've got it wrong. Amanda said she didn't want to come. She was trying to save money." My mother gave a dry, biting chuckle. "That's funny. Just now you said she was spending too much. Now she's saving. Which version is it? Let me make this perfectly clear. No one gets to bully my daughter. He has me, and with me behind her she will never need anyone's pity. She doesn't lack for anything, least of all your crumbs." Then she stood up, pointed to the front door and said without raising her voice, "Get out." Zach and Samantha shuffled out, stunned. It wasn't until they were sitting in the car, silence hanging thick between them, that Zach blinked and muttered, "Wait, I remember now. Your grandma mentioned she was selling the old house. From the way she talked today, it's probably already sold, and if it is, she must have given that money to your mom." Samantha's face drained of color. "What, grandma sold the house?" she gasped. "That place is worth a fortune. No wonder she filed for divorce. She wants to take that money and run. This can't happen. We have to get that money back." From that day on, Samantha changed. She wasn't the smug, self-assured girl I'd left behind. Now she messaged me constantly, asking how my day was, if I was enjoying the trip, how the weather was, when I planned to come home. As if a few sweet words could erase everything she'd said to me. She thought I'd melt the moment. She acted soft like I always used to, but not this time. For days I didn't reply. Then one night she sent a voice message. Her voice trembled, thick with tears. "Mom, I messed up. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean any of it. I was just so angry. I didn't think you'd really leave. Please come back. I swear I'll be different. I'll change. Just come home, okay?" I listened and laughed quietly. She still didn't get it. I didn't walk out because of a plane ticket. I left because I finally saw the truth, what I meant to this family, where I stood, and I wasn't going to stand there anymore. I deleted the message and I kept moving forward. 1 month later I came back. The moment I stepped through the front door, Zach looked like a drowning man grabbing for a lifeline. He picked up his phone with shaking hands and called, "Samantha, she's back. Get home now. I told you she wouldn't go through with it. If she actually signed those papers, we'd be out 300 grand. Samantha showed up in a flash. As soon as she saw me, she threw her arms open and rushed forward. "Mom, you're finally back. I missed you so much." I raised my hand and stopped her cold. Then calmly I pulled the divorce papers from my bag and laid them flat on the table. My voice was even. "General, go ahead and sign these. Keep the house, the car, the daughter. I want none of it." Zach's grin froze in place. His face turned a sickly shade. "Amanda," he said, stunned, "how could you do this? You know how hard I've worked all these years. You sat at home enjoying life for 2 decades, and now you just walk away all because you felt a little left out. That's worth throwing away a marriage." I stood tall and met his gaze, then slammed the papers back on the table with a cold thud. "You think being a housewife is easy? You think Samantha turned out this way by accident? It was you who made me quit my job to raise her, and it was you who spent years tearing me down in front of her, telling her I was worthless because I didn't bring home a paycheck. Your parents sneered at me every chance they got, and you never once defended me. She disrespects me because all her life she's only ever heard you say I was just some freeloader." Zach's face twisted and his tone turned ugly. "Let's be honest, none of this would be happening if your mom hadn't come into money. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You wouldn't dare pull this if you didn't have her bankrolling your rebellion." Samantha, who'd been pretending to look contrite, snapped the moment she heard him. Her face darkened, her voice rose. "You're being ridiculous. Don't think just because you've got some money now you can treat us like garbage. You haven't taken a second to think about your behavior." I looked her in the eye. My voice was icy calm. "Samantha, I truly hope one day you'll learn to think for yourself instead of parroting whatever your father says. I raised you with everything I had. I didn't raise you to treat your mother like she's beneath you." She opened her mouth but nothing came out. I turned to both of them and said slowly, deliberately, "If you won't sign, I'll take this to court. I'm ready either way." And with that I turned open the door and walked out. I didn't look back, not once, because in that moment I knew I was no longer the woman trapped in the kitchen. I was free and I had no intention of ever going back. The very next day after I left, Zach and Samantha showed up at my mother's house that morning. The doorbell rang. My mom told me later it was the two of them again, same faces, same tone, just a different stage. Yesterday they'd played the pitiful victims in front of me. Today they showed up at her door trying to go around me, fishing for answers like father like daughter. What a pair. My mom didn't let them in. She stood right at the door. She placed her freshly cleaned ceramic coffee cup down on the entryway table and said, cool and measured, she's doing just fine, she's just tired of being emotionally blackmailed. Samantha froze for a moment, then forced a smile that looked more painful than sincere. Grandma, we're just worried she might do something impulsive, you know, financially. Zach quickly jumped in. Yes, Bess, we're only trying to protect the family assets. She's just emotional right now. My mother gave a quiet and smiled, but not the kind of smile you'd want to be on the receiving end of. So that's what you're here for, she said, voice sharp beneath the calm. You want to know what she's doing with the money, don't you? They tried to backpedal to explain, but she didn't give them the chance. I've already spoken with a lawyer. Amanda's a grown woman, she can make her own decisions, and if you're hoping to squeeze anything out of me, don't waste your breath. Then she added almost as an afterthought, but each word landed like a gavel strike, stop treating her like she's still some pushover housewife. She knows how to protect herself now legally. The door didn't slam, but it shut with quiet finality. That afternoon I sat in my mom's study for hours. The documents my lawyer had sent were spread across the table, trust structures, asset statements, banking records. I stared at them for a long while, almost dazed. For the first time in my life the papers in front of me weren't handed to me by someone else with a sticky note saying, sign here. They were mine, and the decisions were mine to make. My mom stood by the bookshelf holding a cup of red tea. Her voice was steady. This money, she said, was something I always meant to give you later for your future, to make sure you'd be secure. She paused, then looked straight at me, those gentle eyes now lined with age but sharper than ever. But it turns out you need it now. She came over, sat beside me, and placed her hand gently over mine. Amanda, your father and I, we woke up too late. By the time we realized we had to protect ourselves, we didn't have much left. But you, sweetheart, you still have choices. My throat tightened, my eyes stayed dry, but only because the ache was buried too deep. I picked up the pen, and for the first time I wasn't signing an insurance policy for Zach, not a loan guarantee, not a joint purchase agreement. I signed my own name, sole owner of the trust, and my hand didn't even shake. I did a few very important things that day. I froze all joint accounts with Zach. Every penny I owned was moved into a brand new private account under my name only. I updated my will. Every authorized name that had once been Zach's or Samantha's was removed. I emailed Heather, my lawyer and college friend, with full instructions to handle the divorce. Heather has the mind of a legal textbook and the loyalty of a sister. I called my financial advisor and activated enhanced verification protocols. No money moves without my explicit in-person consent. A week after I made the financial split, Samantha reached out again. This time it was a voice message, her tone light and breezy as if nothing had ever happened. Mom, you're amazing. Going to Iceland and Norway all by yourself. Was it beautiful? I'd love to hear about it. Maybe next time we can travel together somewhere even farther. I didn't respond. A day later another message came in. This time her voice was tight, brittle. Mom, things haven't been great lately. There were layoffs at work and I was thinking maybe I could come home and stay with you for a while. So I said nothing. I wanted to see how long she could keep the act going. 2 days later she sent a screenshot of a credit card statement. Caption read, my card's maxed out. Really wish I hadn't spent so much before. I miss you, Mom. That one nearly made me laugh out loud. Miss me or miss my money? Her teary apologies, her regret. It was all part of the script and I knew exactly what came next. If I caved even a little she'd ramp up the drama. Cue the act. The prodigal daughter begs for forgiveness. I ignored her again, but this time I quietly installed call recording and screen mirroring software on my phone, because when the apology phase ends the manipulation phase begins, and I was done being caught off guard. On the 5th day, just as I expected, she called. The moment I picked up her voice was already quivering with tears. Mom, I really can't do this anymore. I fell downstairs today just outside my building. No one helped me. I was lying there alone and all I wanted was to call you. I didn't say anything, just silence. She waited a beat, then shifted gears, her tone tightening. Did you change your bank password recently? I tried to check your utility bill yesterday and I couldn't log in. I smirked quietly, though my voice remained calm. I've upgraded my account security. The bank recommended it. Said identity theft is on the rise. Her voice sharpened immediately. Mom, I'm not some stranger. I'm your daughter. Are you seriously protecting your account from me? I didn't argue. I stayed steady. If you really want to help, send that paperwork I asked for last month, but don't touch my bank account again. She went quiet just for a few seconds, then let out a bitter laugh. Fine, so I really am an outsider now, huh? No, I replied evenly. You made yourself one the day you started treating me like an ATM. There was a loud thud. She'd slammed her phone against something, then as if the dam finally burst, she snapped, you think you're so above it all, don't you? That trust fund isn't just yours. You lived off Dad's money your whole life and now you want to keep everything for yourself just because you got a divorce. There was the she wasn't looking for forgiveness, she was looking for a balance sheet, for inheritance, for control. I tapped my screen to activate the recording overlay. My tone tone stayed measured, every word intentional. Samantha, you're aware this call is being recorded, right? I'll be forwarding it to my legal team as supporting evidence in my petition for a no-contact order. Silence. Then I heard it. Her composure crumbled. She started sobbing, full body guttural crying. I can't do this anymore. How can you be this heartless? Don't you remember that night I had a fever and you didn't sleep sitting by my bed the whole time? Doesn't any of that mean something to you? I took a breath, a deep studying breath. I remember, I said softly. I remember how I didn't drink a drop of water that night, scared you'd wake up and not see me there. I remember when you were 6 and you said you'd buy me a house when you grew up. When you were 10 you promised to take me to Hawaii, but I also remember how you told me I was embarrassing for being a stay-at-home mom. You asked me not to show up at your parent-teacher conferences. You told me I was useless, that I couldn't help with your homework, that I didn't earn money and didn't deserve respect. She shrieked through the line. So you're cutting me off over that? You'd throw away everything for this? My voice dropped to a whisper, cold clear. No, I'm cutting you off because you're using the love I gave you as leverage, as you think affection is a bargaining chip. I can forgive immaturity, Samantha, but I will not be emotionally extorted. Then I ended the call. I opened her contact profile, blocked her on every platform, set her profile so she could never add me again, and I didn't leave so much as a goodbye. That evening I opened the fridge and saw the pickled cucumbers I'd made the day before. I'd made them with her in mind, just in case she showed up at my door apologetic one last time. Now I took the jar, walked it to the trash can and dropped it, and I wasn't saving anything anymore, not even the hope that she might come back. Amanda, your husband made his move. I had just poured my morning coffee when Heather, my attorney, said it over the phone. Zach filed a petition. He's trying to claim part of your trust fund. She paused, then added, he's arguing that the money your mother gave you was transferred during the marriage, so it should be considered marital property. I let out a quiet laugh. Of course he did, and of course he'd stoop that low, but here's the truth. My mother's money was transferred to me after I moved out, after I officially separated from Zach. She didn't give it to me as a wedding gift. It wasn't some long-term joint investment. She sent it 2 months ago when she saw me at my lowest. She didn't even explain, just sent the funds with a note in the transfer description for my daughter's life, her own life. It was clean, timed, documented, and now Zach wanted to twist that timeline, try to paint it as joint property simply because we weren't legally divorced yet. I didn't say anything. I just flipped through the so-called evidence packet his lawyer had submitted. Unbelievable thick skin, didn't even begin to describe it. His claim stated, while the funds originated from the petitioner's mother-in-law, the transfer occurred during the legal marriage. As such, both parties had theoretical access and shared entitlement. Then, in a final flourish of audacity, he added, I have no objection to these funds being used to support the family and our daughter's future needs. Oh, so that's what this was about, supporting the family or funding his next personal growth journey. Heather and I got to work. We submitted all documents. The transfer date 2 weeks after I had moved out and officially separated from Zach. The receiving account newly created under my name only. Zach had no access, no prior knowledge. Most importantly, the text my mother sent me the day she wired the funds still saved on my phone. It read, don't give him a single cent. This is the first time in your life you get to spend money on yourself. This wasn't a financial dispute. This was Zach finally showing his cards, not afraid of the divorce but terrified of losing control over me and the money. On the day of the hearing, he showed up in the same gray suit he'd worn at least a dozen times during our marriage. Back then he wore it to marry me. Now he wore it to try and walk away with whatever he could grab. He stood trying to sound reasonable. I just want clarity on marital assets. We both have a responsibility to our daughter. Heather stood and opened her file. Her voice was cool, steady. First, these funds were a personal gift from Amanda Mitchell's mother, designated solely for her use. Second, the transfer occurred after legal separation. Zach Mitchell had no involvement in the management of those funds. Third, Zach Mitchell has engaged in multiple acts of financial misconduct, including unapproved loans and fund transfers compromising marital financial trust. We have documentation to support this. She slid the evidence across the table. Screenshots of the wire transfer, the transaction note, the original text from my mother, and best of all, a copy of the loan documents Zach had once asked me to just sign real quick back when he thought I didn't read fine print. I heard Zach exhale sharply across the table. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected me to keep receipts. He never thought the little papers he once slipped under my nose would show up in court as Exhibit A in the case against him. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, wasn't amused. After flipping through everything, she looked up and delivered her ruling in one concise line. It is evident that these funds were a post-separation personal gift from Amanda Mitchell's mother. Mr. Mitchell has no legal claim to them. You hear that? She said it with professional grace, but the message was crystal clear. Zach, keep your hands off my money. Outside the courthouse, Heather handed me a coffee as we stood on the stone steps watching Zach talk with his flustered attorney. She smiled. You know what he's really afraid of? I sipped. Enlighten me. He's not afraid of being broke. He's afraid you're not. He's afraid that you can spend money now without asking his permission. I laughed quietly. No, I said, what scares him most isn't the divorce, it's the fact that I left and I'm doing better without him. I glanced down at the court document in my hand. Across the top it read, divorce petition officially filed. And those words, those 5 plain printed words, felt more comforting than any vow he ever made. The day I walked out of that courtroom, I didn't go home. Instead, I stopped by the town library and filled out a volunteer application. It had always been my dream job, helping people find what they need, recommending books, solving problems that lived on single sheets of paper. Back then Zach had laughed, "What's that going to pay you? Better off staying home with Samantha." So I let the dream go, but now I live for no one but myself, and I figured it's time to try the life I once imagined. 3 days later, I was sitting at the volunteer desk by the library's front window, greeting my first visitor, an older woman asking how to print her social security application. I walked her through the steps, helped her navigate the government site, showed her how to flag scam numbers, printed her medication interactions list. As she was leaving, she squeezed my hand and said, "You're more patient than my own daughter." I smiled. I didn't say anything. I'd heard those words before, only back then they never counted because no one in my family ever believed them. But this time was different. This time I earned them on my own terms. On my walk home, I stopped at the bench near the little park on Main Street. An older woman passed by with her walker. She looked at me, then at the lunch container in my hands. "Eating alone?" I nodded. She nodded back. "Me too. Divorced at 60, lived alone and dinnered alone for 20 years, and the meals just kept getting better." I couldn't help but laugh. "Weren't you scared back then?" She looked me straight in the eye, her grin etched with steel. "Of course I was, but being scared is still better than living with a man who sees you as the help." I didn't know her name. She didn't know my story, but for a while we sat there, 2 old iron scraps slowly warmed by the same sun. That night I got an email from Zach. One line: "Samantha's falling apart," she says. "Your divorce is ruining her emotionally." I didn't reply, didn't open the attachments. I already knew what he was doing, trying to guilt me back into submission, but I'd learned something: not every child deserves forgiveness. The day Zach vanished from social media, I knew he'd finally accepted defeat, but what he didn't expect was how many other defeats were still waiting for him. Without his curated image, the polite nods at church stopped. People who once smiled now turned away. Social warmth paper thin, one gust and it all blows apart. Then his health began to catch up with him. Back pain he'd ignored for years got worse. There was no one around to remind him to eat better or take his meds. Eventually he was quietly removed from the company board. They cited personal credit concerns. It turns out all those years of using me as a guarantor, mixing personal and business accounts, that only flew when he wore the badge of stable home, supportive wife. Now even the courts didn't buy it. Why would the board? He tried turning to Samantha for help, but Samantha had problems of her own. After losing her job, she launched a women's empowerment coaching service, teaching others how to live with confidence and independence. The irony: she'd never figured it out for herself. Her ex got engaged a week after she quit. She broke down, recording a tearful video and posting it online. But her sob story wasn't about love lost, it was about me. How could my mother abandon me like that? Nobody bought it. There were 2 kinds of comments. One group said, "Your mom didn't abandon you, she finally chose herself." The other, anonymous users, reposted my photo, the one of me standing under Iceland's northern lights, coat billowing, captioned, "This woman didn't run away, she came home to herself." Someone had liked the comment. It was me. I didn't take her calls, didn't open Zach's new emails. They no longer deserved my time. The only thing tying them together now, a joint legal invoice. I turned that story into a podcast episode and submitted it to a show about women's reinvention after retirement. The host ended the episode with, "This story comes from Amanda Mitchell, who wants you to remember a woman is not meant to fade into the background of her family or society. She is meant to shine." I got more plays than I expected. 30-some comments stood out. "I made my daughter listen, she didn't say a word. I cried, but not out of sadness. I want to try too. She didn't vanish, she just finally came back to herself." That spring I hiked the forest trails on the west end of town, sneakers on, water bottle in hand, chatting with a group of local volunteers. Halfway through, one woman took my arm and asked, "Are you Amanda? I heard your story. You really did it. You did what the rest of us were too scared to do." I held her hand for a moment, didn't say a word. Because in that moment I realized I wasn't the woman who ran out of a kitchen sobbing, begging for freedom. I was the woman who walked out, stood tall, smiled wide, and had just enough strength left to help someone else take the first step. I'm Bess, Amanda's mom. The day Samantha and Zach showed up at my door, it was bitterly cold. I stood just inside the threshold, watching them with their overly polite smiles and eyes that kept darting always toward the same corner of my living room. They didn't ask to come in, and I didn't invite them. I wasn't interested in hearing another rehearsed speech about concern or family unity. What I did notice was how their gaze kept flicking toward that old filing cabinet in the corner, the one that held decades of Amanda's household records, receipts, and documents. They weren't here to check on anyone's well-being, they were here to check the math, and I saw right through them. I've never been a fool. I remember the first time Amanda brought Zach home. They were newly engaged, still caught in that soft blur of early commitment. The 2 of them sat on the little balcony just off the kitchen, and I brought out a cake I'd baked that morning. Amanda's eyes sparkled as she said, "Zach's so grounded, responsible, family-oriented." But I saw something different. Zach smiled plenty at Amanda, not so much at me. He was pleasant, sure, but distant, polished, not sincere. During dinner he spoke about his goals, his ambitions, the long hours he worked, but never once did he mention responsibility. Not once did he speak of what he'd give to Amanda, only what She understood about him. Amanda's easygoing. He said she gets me. He meant it as praise, but I heard the subtext loud and clear. She's easy to manage. He was attentive to her almost performatively, so to me not a single complete thank you. When dinner was over and I began clearing plates, he didn't even glance in my direction. That was the moment I knew this man might like my daughter, maybe even enjoy her company, but he didn't respect her, and he sure as hell didn't respect her family. So I said nothing because it wasn't my place to choose for her. My role wasn't to block her path, it was to make sure she always had a way back, a soft place to land if the road she chose ever turned rough, and that's what I've done all these years. I watched her quiet, patient pushing through. I watched her swallow every disappointment, every indignity, every heavy silence at dinner when her opinion wasn't asked or her effort wasn't acknowledged. I watched her live the version of marriage I knew all too well, and now all these years later I see the same shadows in her posture that I once carried in mine. But this time the story will end differently, because this time I'm not just the woman in the background making tea and smoothing linens. I'm the one standing in the doorway keeping out the people who never saw her as more than an extension of what they could take. The year Amanda got married I gifted her the wedding dress and jewelry myself. She stood there in her veil crying like a little girl, clutching my hand and saying, "Mom, I'm going to have a good life." I cried too, but not because she was leaving. I cried because deep down I already heard a voice whispering inside me, she's going to suffer sooner or later. After she moved in with Zach, I offered to come by every now and then to help with the baby and meals. She had just given birth to Samantha. She was exhausted, barely able to finish a sentence without nodding off. Zach was polite to me on the surface, but his politeness always carried a certain edge, like I was a guest overstaying my welcome. I remember once at dinner I casually mentioned, "Samantha's cough might ease if you apply a warm compress at night." Zach, without even looking up, replied flatly, "That's an old issue. She always gets over it. No need to fuss." Another time Amanda told me she was thinking of picking up some part-time work before she could finish. Zach cut in, "Your body isn't what it used to be. Wouldn't it be better to just rest at home?" And then there was the day he joked over dinner, "Isn't it kind of natural for Best to help out with the baby? It's not like she's working." He laughed as if it were nothing, but in my ears it landed like lead. I said nothing because I knew exactly what I was looking at. Not a man being careless with his words, but a man skilled in control. One moment I'll never forget. I was in the kitchen washing dishes. Samantha came running in crying for chocolate. I told her gently, "You can have some after dinner." She yelled back, "Why should I listen to you? Dad says you're just the maid." Amanda heard. I saw her expression freeze, but all she did was walk over and whisper, "Mom, I'm sorry, I'll talk to her. She didn't mean it." And that was what broke my heart, not the child's words, but the way my daughter had been trained to apologize for everyone but herself, how she'd learned to carry the weight of others' behavior as if it were her own. She never raised her voice at Zach, never clashed with his parents. She swallowed her hurt, smiled through the pain, and treated injustice like it was just part of the marriage contract. Zach never did dishes, never changed a diaper. On the rare occasions he picked up a broom, he was hailed as the perfect husband. Amanda meanwhile became the unpaid labor of the household. No vacation days, no compensation, no recognition. One night I got up for a glass of water and overheard them through the cracked bedroom door. Zach was yelling, "God, can you not emotionally blackmail me for once? Just because your mom's here you think you can act out?" I stood there, hands shaking. My daughter had become his punching bag and she didn't even have the right to protest. I stayed up all night in the living room, afraid that in the morning she'd put on her smile again like nothing had happened. Some nights when I couldn't sleep in the guest room, I'd take out my journal and write. The very first page said, "My daughter has forgotten that she deserves to be loved too." I kept writing day after day, not to build a case, not to start a war, but to remind myself one day she will wake up, and when she does I need to be the one to tell her, "You're not crazy, you're not selfish, you're just finally blessedly awake." That day when Amanda called me, her voice wasn't like usual. She didn't cry, she didn't complain, she just said softly, "Mom, I'm not coming home for Christmas, I'm going on a trip." I was quiet for a moment, then replied, "That sounds nice, a trip could be good." Then I hung up. That night I sat alone in the living room, my fingers wrapped around the old teacup I'd used for over a decade, but my hands were cold like I was holding a stone. I knew what she meant by a trip. It wasn't vacation, it was escape. I've seen Zach and Samantha's true colors for years. That call from Amanda wasn't a request, it was a release. It was her finally giving herself permission to let go. I stayed up the whole night and pulled out the black leather ledger tucked beneath my bed. It held records of the money I'd quietly kept after selling our old family home. I told myself it was for emergencies, for my old age, but now I realized it had been sitting there for no reason. Amanda didn't need it to survive, she needed it to leave. It wasn't about ability, she could make her own money. What she needed was a launching pad, something that was hers, completely hers. The next morning I went to the bank. The clerk asked, "Would you like to include a note with the transfer?" I said, "Yes, right, for my daughter's own life, non-refundable." That was the moment I understood what I'd been waiting for all these years wasn't for Amanda to change, it was for me to stop pretending I didn't see what was happening, to stop playing the quiet stay of it mother. That night I wrote another page in my journal. She said she wouldn't be home, but I know she's finally starting to walk her own road. It won't be easy, but at least it'll be hers. I clicked the pen closed and turned off the light. It was dark outside, but I felt calm as I knew I'd just given her the safety net she'd never asked for but always deserved. 3 days after Amanda left the country, Zach and Samantha showed up at my door again. It just rained. The air still carried that rich damp scent of soil. They stood there with smiles too wide to be real. "Grandma, we just wanted to check in on you," Samantha chirped, pulling out a box of perfectly packaged cinnamon rolls, "your favorite." I didn't take them. I simply stepped aside to let them in, not because I'd softened but because I wanted to hear exactly what game they were playing, and right on cue once the box was set down Zach spoke first. "Best, we heard Amanda's doing well off traveling, huh?" Samantha added quickly. "Yeah, she posted that Aurora photo, stunning. Even my friends were jealous." I said nothing, just poured each of them a glass of water. I watched them exchange looks like they were trying to decide who'd say it. Finally Zach cleared his throat and said the words that had been sitting on his tongue the whole time. "Bess, we heard you sold your house recently and well, Amanda received the funds." I set my cup down and looked him in the eye. "Who told you that?" Zach gave a sheepish chuckle. "Oh, nothing serious, just something we heard. We just thought maybe Amanda's under a lot of pressure managing it alone, so we wondered if what?" I cut in. "If maybe," Samantha said, leaning in with a smirk, "we could help manage it. We're younger, we understand investments better, we could really help her stretch it." I smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was thin, like the first skim of ice over a winter pond, clear, delicate and sharp enough to cut. "You both know I gave her that money, right?" I said slowly. They glanced at each other, suddenly unsure. "You think I'm some dafted old lady who hands out cash whenever someone cries, nods whenever someone smiles? My daughter earned that money the hard way by surviving. You neither of you will touch a cent." Zach's smile collapsed. His mouth twitched like he still wanted to recover the conversation. "Best, this is just a misunderstanding, we know," I said coldly. "There's no misunderstanding. I heard the way you treated my daughter, the way you used her up, spent her money and still had the nerve to scold her like a child. I heard you say, 'Your mom's here,' so now you act up." "You didn't think I could hear it?" "I did." Samantha sprang up, slamming her hand on the table. "You're trying to sabotage our marriage. My mom never said anything bad about you." I let out a bitter laugh. "Of course she didn't. He protected you, but I don't. I only protect her now." I walked to the door and pulled it open. "I've said what I came to say. You won't touch that money, and if either of you show up again I will call the police. Don't assume age means weakness. I know exactly what I'm capable of." They froze at the threshold, stunned. Zach was the first to turn away, his jaw clenched tight. Samantha shot me a glare that could have started a fire, then followed. I shut the door, and as the latch clicked into place I exhaled long, slow and steady. I used to worry that Amanda would get dragged back in. She's always been gentle, always the one to compromise, to give in at the last second, but after that conversation we had in her study I saw it. He had changed. She was no longer the woman she used to be. A few days later I quietly slipped into her courtroom hearing. I sat in the very last row, hidden behind a column, watching her in a crisp, sharp-cut suit, standing tall at the plaintiff's table. She didn't cry, she didn't flinch when Zach's lawyer tried to twist the facts, to ask the kind of questions meant to confuse and corner. Amanda answered clearly, calmly. Her voice was unwavering, her eyes steady. She wasn't that woman who swallowed her pain anymore. She was something else now, like a blade slowly honed, sharpened by every year. She'd stayed silent, and that day, in full view of everyone, he finally raised it and cut herself free. My eyes filled with tears, not from sorrow, from pride. After the hearing I sat outside on a cold metal bench for 30 minutes, letting the wind whip against my face. I realized I hadn't been waiting for her to win the case, I'd been waiting for her to win on her own, without apologizing, without shrinking. That night she sent me a voice message. There was wind in the background as she said softly, "Mom, don't worry about me, I'm really okay now." I stared at that message for a long time, smiled through the sting in my chest. The next morning I walked to the senior center in town. It was a place I'd passed 100 times but never entered. I'd always told myself I had to stay home just in case Amanda needed me, but now I knew she didn't need a mother waiting in the wings. She had become her own safety net. It was time I gave myself a life too. I signed up for a pottery class and a community memoir reading group. On the first day the teacher asked each of us to write a line that defined us. I wrote, "The proudest decision of my life wasn't giving her life, it was standing behind her." After class an older woman came up to me, gently touched my arm. "That line," she said, "who is it for my daughter?" I answered. She nodded. "She must be remarkable." I smiled. "She is. She really is." That night I slept peacefully. No waking up in the middle of the night, no dreams of all those dinners I sat through, choking down silence and anger. Amanda doesn't need me to step in anymore, and I'm finally learning to step out. I wasn't her escape route, I was the force that pushed her forward when she needed it most. Now she walks with her own strength, so I'll turn around and walk toward a life that's finally mine. Spring has come. The flowers in my yard have begun to bloom. I made a cup of tea and sent her a message. "Sweetheart, I'm doing well too. No need to look back. Keep walking your path. I'll always be just behind."